Okay, looks like we are live. How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome to another episode of Sasquatch Out of the Shadows Live. As always, I'm your host, Alex Pedikov. I hope everyone is having a great night so far. My favorite way to break up the Monday, as I always say, just kind of break up that Monday routine with a fun show. So, as always, guys, if you like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. Share the videos if you're interested. Give us a thumbs up down in the comments and leave us a comment, rather. Last week we had on Connor Anderson of the North American Bigfoot Center. That's the Bigfoot Center in Boring, Oregon, founded by Cliff Barrickman of Finding Bigfoot. We had an awesome talk with Connor. If you want to go see that or other episodes of the show, there's a playlist on the channel, and I'm sure it won't be hard to find if you just click on the channel itself. Next week we're going to be joined by Edward Monge. I think that's how I say it. He actually has a channel called Bigfoot Quest, has done some pretty interesting interviews, also filmmaker into the Bigfoot subject. So it'll definitely be interesting to talk to yet another filmmaker interested in these sorts of topics. Lastly, Chasing Legends, the Rougarou episode, so season finale, episode 4, just came out this past Friday over on the Chasing Legends channel. There's a link in the description to the Chasing Legends channel. That's the only place you'll be able to check it out. Be sure to subscribe. There's going to be other videos coming down on that channel, full-length interviews with some of the witnesses and people we interviewed. But the Rougarou episode was really fun. I think it came out great, and I love the vibe. So if you want to see that, the Champ episode, Monge and Monster, and that stuff, go check out the Chasing Legends channel. So for tonight, we're actually joined by somebody who's been on the show before, not on his own, but Andy Matzke, who is a filmmaker and all-around great guy with Small Town Monsters. We had on his dad, Mark, I want to say last month, maybe a couple months ago. Fairly recently had an awesome talk with Mark. Andy has kind of grown up with Small Town Monsters and Cryptozoology, so it's going to be kind of cool to talk to him. So without further ado, let's just pop Andy on in.
Hey.
Oh, are you in?
Hello? Oh. Hello?
My screen froze there for a second. How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you. Am I good?
For some reason, I can't hear anything now. Let's try this again. This is so weird. It was like the moment I tried to get you in. You can hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you.
I still can't hear you. Let me check your mic here real quick. This is weird. All right, well, let's try it now.
Hi. Hello?
Is your mic? I don't know. It seems I can't really hear you. Can anyone else hear Andy right now? I was just talking to him right before the show went live, so this is really weird.
Hello? I don't know what's going on.
Still got nothing. This is really weird.
Yeah.
I don't get why it was just working and now it seems to not be working. So they can hear, they're saying they can hear both of us. So something's obviously wrong on my end. Ah, great. That's fun. I just tested out my audio. I am getting audio on my computer here, so I should be able to hear you, Andy.
I don't know what's happening then. Let's see.
Jeez. Well, Andy, if you want to introduce yourself while I try and figure out what's going on here, you can go right ahead. If you want to add a little bit more to that, I just can't hear him for some reason, guys. I don't know what's going on here. My computer is just tripping out.
Well, I'm Andy Matzke. I'm a former podcast host and of Sasquatch, a show about Bigfoot, and Monsterland Ohio Radio. You probably know me from Small Town Monsters if you read the credits of the movies. I've worked on quite a few of those, going back all the way to Boggy Creek Monster, and I've worked on several since then. And my latest entry and my latest film I worked on was, well, that you'll be seeing, is On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Journey, which I worked on with Alex here. I also worked on The Mark of the Bell Witch a little. I did cinematography for both of those. There a few podcasts. Oh, I host a podcast now that I forgot about called Somewhere in Ohio. It is about whatever I want to talk about, basically. I mean, it's the title Somewhere in Ohio probably should have been thought about more, because it's not just about things in Ohio. But when I was about to start the podcast, I had another name in mind, and then Somewhere in Ohio came to me. I was like, that's a great title. And then I just stuck with it. So I really don't know what else there is to say about myself right now, since Alex is still gone. If you want to check out Somewhere in Ohio, oh, here he is. There he is.
Okay, I'm back. I don't know what was going on. I was on an older computer that I usually use for the show, and I just had to switch. My browser just freaked out. So thank you for hosting the show for there a minute, Andy.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, luckily, Somewhere in Ohio has given me experience just talking to myself about things for a little while. So.
Oh, perfect.
We're good.
I was like rushing around, and yeah, I don't know why that happened. That was really weird.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, folks. But as you can see, Andy is an awesome guy. So let me just make sure volume and everything's good. So. Okay, thank you guys for bearing with us. Let's just start out as we always kind of do. I know you're probably saying some cool stuff, but do you want to maybe give a little background on what got you interested in these subjects?
Yeah, well, I think it may seem obvious, but my dad was like the major reason I'm into all this. What sort of got me interested in all of it? I have vivid memories of watching Monster Quest with him. Specifically, like the memory that I have is like watching the Beast of Bray Road Dogman episode. Like you think it would be a Bigfoot episode, but I'm almost positive that was one of the first ones I saw. I remember watching that, and that sort of being my interest. My dad always had Coast to Coast AM on, and so I'd hear that, like recordings of that, and you know, in more modern times they have like it in podcast form. That, and then sort of we moved to down near southeastern Ohio, and my dad talked about this right around, you know, Salt Fork State Park, which this was sort of the time that Bigfoot in Ohio was really booming.
It was starting to pop off.
Yeah, it was, and that was like the Ohio Bigfoot Conference started to get a big deal, and we started going to that, and there I saw people that I had seen on Monster Quest and that I had heard my dad talk about, and that I had like we'd probably watched like documentaries, and I read, you know, the young reader books from the library. And it was going to that conference that really, you know, showed me that, like, as silly as this may sound, you know, these people are real and they're really going out and doing these things. And then you have Salt Fork, which, you know, depending on who you talk to, has like all these sightings. And we lived in this area that seemed to be, you know, the hot spot at the time in Ohio. And so just going out in the woods, and then it's like the idea of looking for Bigfoot sort of happened. And then we met Seth and at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, which that story has been told.
Oh, it's so
lot,
good.
But it's
so
such
good.
a good story. I was thinking about it the other day, and like my dad and I was talking about this, but you can literally, hey, if there's a time traveler out there and you want to like destroy what I'm living now, just go there and make sure there's enough seats for everyone.
Yeah,
right.
Like, just split that table up.
Or have us go like 5 minutes earlier, or like have my mom not say, hey, can we sit there? And that's the thing, is like my mom was like, hey, I found these guys who like said we can sit with them at our table. And I had been going to Bigfoot conferences long enough, even at that real young age, to go, oh no, who are these people going to be? Because, you know, you never get never know who you're going to get. But it turned out to be, you know, Seth and his dad, who were wonderful people. And, you know, then came along Sasquatch, which was, you know, Seth and my dad for a while. And that's sort of, for that time, my dad was really into Bigfoot. And I mean, he still is, but like, that's sort of like, I feel like when my dad's interest took off, and I noticed that, was on that show a few times, did my own podcasting with Monsterland Ohio Radio way back in the day. And then going to Fouke in, what would it be, 2016? Going down there, that's sort of like, you know, was the first time I went to like one of these hollowed ground locations, and first time I really felt, you know, like at any moment, and I'm sure I could talk all day about going down to Fouke, even though that was like 4 years ago, is like, that's the first time I encountered woods that thick that like you can't see 5 feet into the woods, and like that's not an exaggeration. You don't know what
The
could be out there.
creepy factor is just
Period. Like
there.
not just Bigfoot, like warthogs or alligators. You don't know what could be beyond the wood line, and seeing that, and it like when you're out there in Arkansas and like the sun starts to set, sun starts to go down. We were out there one night and at a park, and my dad's the one to remember the names, not me. And frogs started up just like in the beginning of the movie, and it was of Boggy Creek, and it was just so cool. And then more being involved with more STM projects and going to more conferences sort of got me exposed, and like being involved with STM sort of really enforced the like folklore end of this, and like that these are stories that have affected local history regardless of if they're true or not.
Right.
It's sort of that angle at it that I've really taken as my own, and like that's how I approach this. I'm not necessarily someone who goes out in the woods every weekend, even though I'm not opposed to that, but like I'm not that person. I'm more of looking how these impact the places that they happen and the people they happen to.
Sure.
And like how that functions sort of more relative to the people than like the creature itself.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big things about small town monsters. I mean, that name, it just kind of rings unanimous with small town America, small towns that have these stories. They may be, in the case of like a Bigfoot story, like the Fouke monster. I mean, there are other Bigfoot stories across the country, but there's no place like Fouke. And then you get something like Flatwoods monster or something more specific where there's really only one place it's ever happened, Beast of Bray Road. I mean, that sort of stuff gets really interesting. It's just one of those things with small town monsters, even that I've found, myself working with you guys over the years, it's just been, that sort of embodying that sort of idea of covering those stories, regardless of whether it's real or not, but just kind of they're just laying out the facts and letting people make up their own conclusions. And a lot of times it's people that might not even believe in these things, but it's still just clearly it has a tangible effect on the communities and the people that are out there. Now, forgive me if I'm making you repeat yourself, but if you said this at the beginning, but how old were you when you first started out with STM? I know, because, it's been a while so far.
With STM, we met Seth. I was running the numbers yesterday when I met Seth, and this was pre-STM. I think I was 11. And then first shoot, I was 13. I had just turned 13.
Amazing.
Like 2 weeks prior to going down to Fouke. And that was the first shoot we were a part of. And I've been a part of them periodically for the past 4 years.
And what a shoot to be on, Fouke specifically.
That was.
There's a lot of great people in the comments. I do just want to read a couple of the comments here. We've got Christy saying, "Hey, Alex, this is Christy. She's with Tactical Mike. They have a show together."
Oh, yeah.
Smoke and Joe. Hello, folks. How you guys doing? B. Lynn, I just want to read this comment. She said, "I'm very glad I found this channel. The interviews and subjects are first class. I'm sharing this channel. I've been binge watching previous videos. Well done. Best wishes. Your channel's great." Thank you very much. It really means a lot. This kind of was sparked the idea last year, almost coming up on a year here, actually, of this channel, just sort of doing this sort of thing, hanging out with friends and tech issues and all aside. Just kind of, talking to people that I want to talk to and talk about all these awesome, interesting topics. We have also Carrick and a bunch of people in the comments. Tactical, Bigfoot Researchers, Mike, and of course, he was on a few shows ago. Awesome folks. Awesome. Thank you guys all for tuning in as always. So gosh, I think there's just so much I want to get to. We talked a little bit about what we don't talk about before, but maybe let's go down the path of the productions you worked on so far. I don't want to say which was your favorite, but maybe run us through a little bit of each one, kind of what your takeaways were. I know that may take a while.
This is going to be interesting. Yeah. the tricky part will be remembering. I've been on like 3 or 4 shoots, like 2 or 3, I don't even know, like 3 or 4 shoots, like the documentary end, but it's a lot of the movies I've played a very little part in. So I guess going back to Boggy Creek, that was the first time I'd seen one of these places, and it was a place that I had such, an attachment to already, like with loving Legend Boggy Creek, but also loving the third movie, which claims to be the second, which is Legend of the Boggy Creek 2 and The Legend Continues, which was on Mystery Science Theater 3000. Loving that so much. So being a part of that shoot and watching how a shoot works, or at least an STM shoot works, was incredibly fun. I mean, like, it was just like at all times it was like we're here and we're doing this amazing thing. Being able to be down there with Lyle Blackburn, who sort of, is like the Boggy Creek historian at this point.
Boggy Creek, yeah.
Yeah. That was incredible. I remember he gave us, the first day my dad and I were down there was different than the first day of the shoot. We came down, I think, 2 days into the shoot. And he's a great guy. He gave my dad and I a little tour of the area. And that was just so cool. Seeing Boggy Creek and seeing where like the Ford property was and all that. It's amazing. I don't want to dwell too much on Boggy Creek because I think I could talk about that shoot for the whole episode, which I think anyone in like my family and close friends could tell you, like, I don't shut up about Arkansas.
Oh, it's a special place. I totally get that with Falk. I mean, it really is.
Which way do STM shoots go? Next full shoot I was a part of was Bray Road Beast. And so I remember that shoot really well. We were down there, up there. And that was a really special place to me too, because like I said, that episode of Monster Quest and Linda Godfrey is sort of the first cryptozoologist I like remember. Like seeing her on that Monster Quest episode, and like I vividly remember her poster board with like all the thumbtacks in it of like the sightings, like that, like that's vivid in my brain.
Sure.
And, like, that's imprinted in there. And like what I think a cool office looks like is that sort of bulletin board with everything. Oh, I skipped Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. I was a part of that shoot, and we had known Stan Gordon. My dad and I had known Stan for a little while before then, but this was the first time we had been to the Chestnut Ridge, and we've since been back multiple times. But
weren't you like the Bigfoot in that?
I fitted the head that's in like 2 seconds.
Yeah,
I like fitted it for Seth to wear. Is sort of my most notable contribution to that movie, and we still have that head downstairs. That like the first night, we were down there. Like there was really not much to do, and we were about to shoot recreations behind the rental property we had, and that's like all those weird, like most of those weird night shots with like the
lights,
and the fog. That was all shot. Wasn't shot in Ohio. It was shot on the Chestnut Ridge. That was shot on location. And Seth had this monkey mask that he wanted to have the eyes glow, and I fitted it for that, and that was really cool in multiple ways because I've always been a fan of like special effects and like Jim Henson. And so to like do that was like so cool. And then that picture has since like appeared in like the local newspaper when they did a piece about us coming there. So that's sort of like one of the iconic Andy Matzke shots is that movie. There's that shot with me of the head. And that was just such a fun shoot. Going to Kecksburg for the first time, seeing the acorn. For those who don't know, they have Kecksburg's known for a UFO crash, and they have a little model of it in the middle of this town that has almost nothing else.
Super unique. It's a really unique story. I mean, the theories that it possibly could have been either an early Soviet space or early Soviet satellite. Some people even thought that it was a Nazi satellite that was launched before the end of the World War II.
Yeah.
And then obviously the theories about the aliens. So if you're interested in that, check out Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, because you guys talk about that a lot in the film itself, along with all the other weirdness.
Yeah, that's a great film. That's a film I go back to and watch just because I love the Chestnut Ridge, and my dad narrates it, so it's fun to watch. And because I'm there so often, I mean, my dad and I were just there this summer before we went to film The Journey, just to like spend a week away from a hike around here. It's gorgeous, the Laurel Highlands. And then Bray Road Beast, that was a blast getting to be there with Linda. I had this this moment on that shoot that was really weird that like I'll remember forever, hopefully. That was I remember listening to her on Coast to Coast, like my dad having her on Coast to Coast when I was real little. And, just sort of knowing who she was vaguely as like the lady from the show. And my dad probably had a few of her books at the time. And we went to the property that she talks about in her books that they've had, weird sightings happen on and like weird events happen on. Like I'm doing a very poor job of explaining this, but I remember like, oh, that's so cool that there's like this property right near there that they have stuff happening to.
Sure.
And I realized while we were there, like literally not like before we went, while I was there that, oh, this is the place hearing all those stories about from like when I was a little kid. And that was just like, oh, I'm here. Like maybe not, well, like appreciating it, but not maybe as much as I should have going into it. It was really fun. That shoot had a little bit to do with On the Trail of Bigfoot 1. I shot the Eric Altman section, like where Seth's out on the Chestnut Ridge. Interestingly enough, I was a part of that. I don't think anything else.
Well, like as you mentioned too, just with small time monsters in general, there's been like a constant, returning to the Chestnut Ridge, as you would put it. I mean, obviously there was the entire film about the Chestnut Ridge. It was a part of On the Trail of Bigfoot, and then it was on a part of On the Trail of UFOs, and that was right before Seth and the crew came out here they went to New York first, and they came up to New Hampshire. So that was like hearing the story that Seth and the crew told when they were in the Chestnut Ridge and had like a house haunting episode. I don't know if I think Seth maybe talked about that when he was on the show when I first started this live stream. But so like the Chestnut Ridge has been a constant throughout the productions. And I'm sure you probably end up returning there at some point.
Yeah, hopefully we will, because I think we all love that area, and it's like conveniently located for us because it's not too far for us. It's about 3 or so hours from where I am now, and then closer for the rest of the crew.
Sure.
Momo, the Missouri Monster, we have shared experience working on that movie.
Oh gosh, man! So Momo, the Missouri Monster. For folks who don't know, that was it was about the Missouri Monster, obviously, but it was a documentary about the Missouri Monster within a fake TV show starring Lyle Blackburn, where they claim to find a found footage, or not a found footage, like a cheesy 70s sort of homage to Legend of Boggy Creek film within the documentary. So you get like layers and layers deep in the film, but we had some times where we were filming out till, that was like 5 in the morning, maybe.
It was, yeah, I think it was 5. We were out there, but it took like an hour to get back to where we'd call it an early morning. So
it was a whirlwind. I had gone to, that was my first time ever going to the Ohio Bigfoot conference. And Cliff and Bobo were both speaking at the conference, and they were, and I drove down to Ohio from New England with the Squatchachusetts guys, and they were, driving back. So I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to find a ride. So I ended up riding with Cliff and Bobo, and we show up to the shoot, and you guys are all cowboyed up and dressed up in the outfits, and we were out there for a while.
Yeah.
We didn't end up finishing. I mean, Cliff and Bobo and a big chunk of the crew ended up leaving the posse scene, but we ended up staying out there with like 6 or 7 of us with the Momo in the costume till like 5 in the morning. And we were it was so exhausting. I don't think I've ever slept that harder after that.
Yeah.
Both of us were staying at Seth's house, and we just ended up like,
we both ended up at Seth's
crashing.
house. I feel like that's like a funny little thing is like, that's how STM goes, is you end up at Seth's house and then like sleeping a little bit and then continuing the day.
One crazy memory I remember is when we were in that, like the ruins of that house. There was, I don't know what that is. There's some kind of a mill or something near the river. And it was this pit, and we had thrown all these bones in there. And we were doing the fog machine, and Adam, who is the star of the movie, he jumped down off this like ledge and landed and like fell straight on his back. And I'm in an instinct, I was like, oh my God, we're going to have broken bones out here. Like for real. He was totally fine, but it was a crazy memory. And that movie, there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears put into putting Momo together.
Yeah. My only other contribution to that movie is I'm the person who made the crazy board when like Adam's character like loses his mind obsessing over the Missouri Monster, and he makes that that crazy board, and that finally ended up at STMHQ 2 days ago. It's been in our dining room since Momo
Oh,
was shot.
it's such a cool poster. I mean, that's going to be an
Mhm.
awesome part of STMHQ, no doubt.
Yeah. And then up till Bell Witch, I wasn't really involved with anything. I mean, like talking about recent releases,
Sure.
I went down and was a part of that shoot, was a cinematographer on the film, and that was a good time. And then the obvious one that I think the listeners here will enjoy the most is I was one of the cinematographers along with you and Seth on the trail of Bigfoot, The Journey.
Yeah. So if folks want to see our initial impressions back from July, I believe it was July or June or something,
Mhm.
we filmed with Seth and Andy. We had a recap of that. But now that the film is done, you've seen it,
Yeah.
I've seen it. I mean, it's ridiculously awesome. It's going to be coming out in April, folks. So definitely stay tuned with Small Town Monsters to find out, more about the details of that film. In conjunction to that, my production, Beyond the Trail, is going to be coming out around the same time, I believe. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I know it's going to be fairly soon after the release of On the Trail of the Journey. So let's talk about that now, maybe a little bit in retrospect. That trip. I mean, it was an amazing trip.
Yeah.
I just sent off chapters I wrote for the book that your dad's working on,
Mhm.
which includes sections from a lot of the On the Trail of stuff. I wrote something about On the Trail of UFOs as well as On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Journey. But let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, the takeaways now that the film is done, having seen it, what are your thoughts on it?
I had this. We had a screening. Little context. We had a screening 2 nights ago with the local STM crew
Yeah.
at STMHQ, and I had this feeling as we were driving home that we had accomplished what we set out to do. Like that, it was like it worked. That the movie worked for what we needed to do. It wasn't just a film that'll be cool for us, like having been there and like being there. That we'll go, oh, look at that. I mean, that it works as that, but that we set out to do this film that tells a specific story and that like it captures Bigfoot in that region, captures what the region is like and how Bigfoot plays a part in that. And it works without
really
trying
does.
to give too much away. And just the way it looks, the fact that it looks really great with everything that you and Seth shot and that I shot, that it looks great and that it tells the story it needs to. I think people will really like it. I think people will love it because like it captures Bigfoot in a part of the country that you might not associate too much with Bigfoot in like as if you went there on your own, 5-day excursion.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's obviously a personal journey for those of us who were on the journey.
Mhm.
I watched it and I relived some of my memories.
Yeah.
But I think for folks not watching, like they're going to come out of that film saying, wow, I did not, if they're not from this area,
Mhm.
they're going to come out saying, wow, I did not think that New York and Western Massachusetts were Bigfoot habitat areas, but like we're showing in full force that they are. You have that wilderness in the Adirondacks, Whitehall, of course, which is like the Bigfoot spot on the East Coast, basically. I mean, in the Northeast, at least.
Mhm.
The Kinderhook thing, which is almost like a story within a story. And then you have the Western Massachusetts thing where we had something happen out there. Maybe the only thing we had that we captured. I won't say too much about it, but the sheer amount of researchers we got to bring into the loop. I mean, you have heavyweights on the East Coast like Paul Bartholomew, Steve Culls and his crew, Bruce Hallenbach, and then folks, like Squatchachusetts, John Wilkin, those guys that I work with pretty regularly here in New England that like I had never really been out to that area where they do a lot of their research and where John had his encounters. So it was just the sheer amount of people we brought into it was just amazing. That was, I was, like I said, I was writing about it recently to get the chapter off to your dad. And it kind of also brought me back to some of those memories.
Yeah. I think, I really don't think there's anything like it for like any region. And that's not to slight any of the work we've made before, but because we haven't set out to do something like that, but it's really a unique film. I mean, it deals with the same old Bigfoot stuff, but like it looks at it from a really unique perspective. And I'm just like, I'm really like excited for people to see it. And because I think everyone will appreciate it, especially people who are like into this stuff already, who like understand what it's like. Something I think it poorly captures, but I might be a little biased, is just how insane that shoot was. Because it like, I mean, yeah, we're constantly in the car and yeah, we're constantly doing stuff. There's not any like down points, which is good. But like that movie, that and like that was from Lake Sacandaga to Kinderhook to Western Mass and back to New York again. I feel like you can't capture that without exhausting the viewer. So
yeah, exactly. We could have done a vlog style about it, or like that that random restaurant in Western Massachusetts where it felt like we were literally in the end of the world.
That was the weirdest thing. I think we might have talked about this last time.
We probably did,
on the show. So forgive us, listeners. But we went from the isolation of the wilderness to Pittsfield, Massachusetts, which you think would be like populated, and there was no one. I mean, this was Corona at its height.
This was June in Corona, but like we sat in this rewird and just had such a weird experience. And
we went in a restaurant and nothing happened. So like no one came up to us, nothing. It was just absolutely bizarre. But it all ended in Angelina's Subs. So
I was just gonna say, shout out to Angelina. That place was great, and the lady was treating us like her kids, basically. In there,
she was the nicest lady. Shout out Angelina Subs. I always have to do this now. I feel like if I talk about On the Trail of Bigfoot, the journey, but shout out Angelina Subs in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. If you're in the area, stop by. It'll be great.
There's so many, George Henry's, the restaurant we went to. I mean, I talked about that when Mike was on the show, when you guys had your incident with raw. You end up eating raw chicken. They ordered chicken and at a burger place, a place known for its burgers, and they got raw chicken. But there's so many little moments like that. Like I just remember that drive from Western Massachusetts to Troy, New York, I believe, where we were staying. And we cut through that corner of Vermont, which is near Bennington.
We were in Vermont.
The Bennington Triangle. So like we could have done a whole nother day where we went off to the Bennington Triangle, which is really close to that whole area. So there's a lot there. I think when people watch this movie, they'll come out more with an appreciation, especially if they're from, let's say, the New York City area or Long Island or something. They might come out with it and say, wow, I can just go like 4 or 5 hours north in my own state, my own backyard practically, and really have some pretty interesting Bigfooting territory. Like you don't have to travel, to the West Coast or something like that to really experience that. So I think it's going to be really cool to see what people's reactions are to that film.
Yeah, I'm really excited for people to see it. I'm sort of tired of already talking about it, knowing it, having seen it, but like people, it's going to be like a month still till people can see it. It's going to be tough waiting.
Oh, I know, but we have stuff on the horizon in the meantime. Let's talk about On the Trail of Bigfoot, the Discovery. So this is going to be basically it's on the trail of Bigfoot, but it's sort of a continuation. I wouldn't really say a continuation directly of the journey, but it's within the series, but it can be standalone. And I announced it a little bit last week when I had Connor Anderson on, because he's out in the PNW and we were talking about that. But do you want to maybe just give a summary from your perspective what it's going to be?
Well, On the Trail of Bigfoot, the Discovery will take place on the Olympic Peninsula, and will mainly focus on the Olympic project, the kind folks out there, and sort of trying to capture that area and spend an extended amount of time, extended for STM, spend some time out there and really capture the area that's sort of like this iconic location for Sasquatch. So yeah, that's sort of like my perspective of it.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I mean, it's interesting because I think a lot of us haven't really been out there ever before. Mm-hmm. I certainly haven't. You haven't.
Yeah.
Your dad and Seth are pretty much the only ones who have had kind of they dipped their toe in that area. But it's going to be a massive crew. I mean, you've got Seth, obviously your dad, you, Shannon LeGros, Aaron Gaskin, mm-hmm. Seth's wife, Aaron's wife. I'm going to be out there. Eli Watson's going to be out there. So it's going to be a massive crew. I mean, I talked about it last week. Eli and I are kind of doing a different thing while still mm-hmm. being out there and being we're like this. I'm calling it the scout group, the scout group. We're out doing the scouting, and you guys are kind of the main army or whatever. STM army.
Yeah, but we're expanding like an army.
Oh, seriously. The web is getting more intricate, but just being able to be out there with the Olympic project, I mean, it's just such a privilege. We were talking about that before the show.
Yeah. It's just like, there's Bigfooting at like the hot spot in your state. I guess this depends on what state you're in, but there's like Bigfooting in like the hot spot in Ohio. And then there's like being out in the woods in the Olympic Peninsula or the Adirondacks. It just feels different.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited. Like that's something that messes me up sort of with like, not to get on too much of a tangent, but with like my whole view of Bigfoot is like, oh, it kind of makes sense for Adirondacks, Olympic Peninsula, but then you throw that in like where I live and it sort of messes me up. But like to be out there is going to be so exciting and like be places that not many people have gone before.
Yeah.
Or basically anyone, like, and be able to document those places. It's going to be real fun.
Oh, totally. I think around the same time, that's when the journey is going to be coming out. So the journey is also going to be sort of, it's like our first post-COVID lockdowns kind of adventure. So that I think will definitely be pretty interesting for people. But around the same time, we'll be out there in Washington filming. So I don't know. I'm not going to say what I think it's going to be like, but it's definitely going to be, some pretty exclusive access to what the Olympic Project is doing. And, we've had Shane on the show before. Awesome. I was talking to him the other day and I'm just so ecstatic to be out there and just to see those nests and all that other stuff that's out there.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting and sort of feel like I will gain a new perspective on all this, Bigfoot stuff, and sort of just to be there and see what everything's like. It'll be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Now, what do you say we start taking a couple questions here? I see there's definitely some questions in the chat. Let's see. We have one from Carrick. I believe he addresses to your first point when I was like gone. But how was working on Mark of the Bell Witch different from working on the Cryptozoological Small Town Monsters documentaries?
For me, it was knowing less about the subject matter, sort of discovering it down there. I don't know if that's necessarily the answer you're looking for, but going into like the films I had previously worked on, it was stories that I had like quite a familiarity with. But you still learn new stuff when you go to the places. But I knew very little about the whole Bell Witch legend before I went down. I watched a couple YouTube videos about it. I think I listened to the Moth Boys episode about it. And that was my research. That was sort of like what I did before we went down. So it was discovering like what the story was, and then working on sort of, more of the production and working on the narrative film was sort of like, that was the first time I'd worked on like, and we had done, I guess, Momo's a little bit more, but we have like the really scripted, like thought through recreations in that movie, and working on those was a lot of fun. It's a lot less, I mean, not to say a lot of the STM stuff's stressful, but it's a lot less stressful than the other stuff. Like it's a lot chiller and there's a lot more laughing. I mean, you can't really laugh during someone's interview. So
and you're not relying on somebody you don't know, as in, when you're waiting on a witness or something, they might be late now, or you may be tight with scheduling, weather gets in the way. Whereas here, you're just kind of doing your thing. You have people that are actors, and it's maybe a little bit more, like you said, relaxed. I always enjoy working on narratives too, although documentary stuff is definitely more of my passion. But
and watching my mom and dad act was really fun because they both did that. I mean, my mom had been in Momo before, and I'd seen that, but like it was just fun.
Sure. What was the percentage of like filming in Ohio versus filming in Adams, Tennessee, and in Tennessee?
I filmed very little of like the sort of recreations, and like I filmed quite a bit down in Adams, and like overall time it took, I mean, we were down in Adams for like 5 days and the recreations took like 2 or 3, like I guess by the time it was all done, it was about 4 or 5 also.
Yeah, so it's definitely, I mean, if folks haven't checked that one out either, definitely really cool, because those recreations, I think, are something that differentiates it a little bit from other STM films, just the intricacy of them and like the amount of it. Like I've liked stuff in the past, especially like in, Mothman related stuff, a lot of those animations and some of the stuff, Bray Road, I love that kind of stuff, but this is like taking it to another level, I think. Yeah, and it's cool to see you guys doing stuff like that. Just like like you said, like your dad acting and that sort of stuff. It's fun.
Yeah, we definitely took a step towards like narrative, and like I don't want to say fiction because that's sort of ambiguous and vague, but like towards all that. And that was really interesting to see how the STM like sort of format adapted to that.
Sure. All right, so we have a question here from Media Hatchet Communications, who asks, question about legendary small town monsters production crew meals. What was your favorite dessert and where was it eaten?
Dessert? We've gotten ice cream at quite a few places throughout the years, in different locations. That's been fun. I don't know, like I'm not often like one to get dessert at a restaurant, so I don't know if
Right.
I'm the one to say, because I normally stuff myself with like the main course. Ice
I hear
cream.
you.
Also, when we were filming Bray Road, it went over my birthday, and we went to a Mexican restaurant for my birthday, and someone told them it was my birthday, and so like there was like some dessert that they brought out, and then like that had whipped cream that then they smeared on my face. That was actually really good.
That's a good memory.
So that, I think, besides that, I'm probably forgetting something amazing. So please forgive me, but that springs to mind is if there's a place where we can get ice cream, we tend to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I guess George Henry's raw chicken doesn't count as a dessert.
Yeah, yeah, that really doesn't fit the bill. Yeah.
No, but I get what you're saying. I mean, usually I'm the same way. I'm stuffing myself with a burger or something. I just don't have room for dessert. But thanks for the question, Media Hatchet. Yeah. So Greg of All the Weird asks, Andy, if you were in an STM shoot and a bear started chasing the crew, would you push another crew member down to save yourself, and who?
I don't know. If we saw a bear on an STM shoot, I really think the crew would start running before it started chasing us. So I don't think this is like an issue that we have to like work on. I think we'd all be like, oh, that's really cool. Now let's get out of here before any confrontation started.
I guess that's going to be something to watch out for in the Olympic Peninsula. Maybe mountain lions more so.
Mountain lions will be our main concern. Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, it was like on one of the show, I think it was Bigfoot Society. Seth was like, I tuned in to Seth announcing the discovery, and he's talking about what Eli and I are doing. He's like, I guess it's going to be Alex trying to keep Eli alive out in the woods. Like, oh gosh, I hope that's not like my entire responsibility.
Yeah.
That'll definitely be interesting. Okay, so Quick Witty here asks, have you guys seen the Patterson Bigfoot drawing that has been circulated recently? Have you seen it? Yeah, I've seen it.
I don't think so. I haven't.
It's like it's done by Doug Hychek, actually, who was the guy who did Monster Quest. Folks might remember I had him on the show. He's actually coming on the show next month, this month, technically, March. Forgot that it's already March. He will be on the show, I believe, not this next week, but the week after. I think he's coming on the show either way for a second time. So we'll definitely ask him about that then. But he claims to have made like a computer scan of kind of Patty's face from the PGF film and has it overlaid on the footage, and it looks kind of interesting. I've just been seeing it blow up in a lot of the groups online.
Yeah, I'm not plugged into Bigfoot stuff like I should be. I apologize.
So Mike asks, what is Andy's favorite camera? So you've obviously worked with a bunch over the years.
I shot a little bit with the A7S III, the new Sony camera, when we were down in Cave City just for a little trip, Seth, his kid, and my dad and I. And that was a lot of fun because that thing's like crazy in low light. And I shot a lot with the A7 III on The Journey, and that was a lot of fun. Those things work really well in low light, almost better than a human eye does. So, I mean, there's whole scenes when we're out in the woods with Squatchachusetts, and anytime we're out in the woods, there's whole scenes that are shot with like Seth and I's headlamps.
Yeah,
that look fine. That look really good. So I think those Sonys are like my favorite, and those are the ones I've worked with for the most part on like STM shoots.
Yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to read this comment from Media Hatchet. Said, I thought that Andy might say ice cream since it has been referenced on Monsteropolis a few times. The sub place sound good also. Yeah, great.
Yeah, it was so good. Yeah, I feel like I'm forgetting some great STM dessert. I feel bad, but it's fine.
So yeah, no, that's a great camera though. I'm thinking about definitely something along those lines, because that low light, especially when you're out in the woods, I mean, having that ability is just crucial without having to do the cheesy like night mode or whatever. There are a lot of cameras. No, I mean, nothing wrong with that, obviously, but it's nice to get that crisp full picture.
Yeah, those things look good if you have like a little light, and you can work with a lot when you want to be like focusing on other things, which is nice.
Yeah, those Sony A7S, they're called the kings of low light. I mean, they do that exceptionally well. So Raptor Crazy asks, has anyone watched the one from History Channel this past Friday with William Shatner? That was also a pretty good video, in my opinion. I don't think so. Is that like the new Unsolved Mysteries or something like that? Like, or no, I know there's some show with William Shatner going on now.
I've heard things. I think I saw something on Facebook about it, but I haven't seen it.
Sure.
I don't know. Shatner's cool.
Yeah, definitely.
It's probably pretty good.
So Glenn H asks, or I guess it's a comment, I know that the Bennington to Troy area, very rural with tons of cornfields. Are there any increases in sightings near farmland during harvest season, i.e. food grabbing? Have you heard of that out in Ohio? I know you guys have a lot of farmland and stuff.
There's definitely a lot of sightings in areas. I mean, like the whole Minerva area was like farmland, but I don't know if there's been any specific sightings of Bigfoot like stealing a little food for himself. My dad would be the guy to ask about that. There should be. You'd think there would be. They'd take advantage of that a little. Just take a little for themselves. Try out some corn, but yeah, I don't know. That would be interesting because there definitely is ample farmland around here and alleged Bigfoot sightings. So.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard of some in places like Pennsylvania and other areas where they've seen taking corn, and I know of a couple stories here in New Hampshire of blueberries being picked because around when they start coming out in like August, there's oftentimes lets me see bears is when they're eating the blueberries, but there's more than a few stories I've heard of people saying blueberries are being eaten by something they think is a bear until it stands on two legs and walks away like looking as a Bigfoot. But I'd be curious to know like if people have mapped out or seen, like they talk about the fall being more active for sightings in general. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know.
Wasn't the Skookum cast it grabbing like an apple or something?
Yeah, it was supposed to be grabbing some sort of an apple thing. I think most people consider it to be elk now, that it was actually an elk impression, but
it's Bigfoot.
I mean, you've got the Vermont picture there. That's not that far from Whitehall.
Oh yeah.
With it was on Finding Bigfoot. That was supposedly in like an apple orchard. I've heard a drunk Bigfoot like story with apple orchards nearby. Like, pretty interesting. Mr. Tumulus asks, what's the official STM fan Discord server?
I don't think there is one, but I also I find out most of my STM news via like Seth's interviews. So I may be behind.
There might be one,
I don't think there is one. Not sure though. I'm not the person to ask. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there is. I mean, I have a Discord, or I have the app, and I've probably been on there like twice since I first got it. So
yeah, I was on it quite a bit with my friends during lockdown. Like just the app, Discord itself would play Among Us. That's my Discord experience. I don't know about. I'd like to be in the STM fan Discord if there is.
Maybe there is. I don't know. We'll have to check
if there is one.
I'll let you guys know if there is one. Glenn H says corn also attracts deer. Oh, that's a good point. So the deer, they come out for the corn. Maybe Squatch is right in after them. Who knows? That's a good point for sure. Where did this question just go? We'll take. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm losing track here. It was another question from Quick Witty. I like this one. Is STM planning on going back to Area X or any other new spots? Lots of new stuff coming out of Oklahoma and Texas.
I'm not sure. I know that I think we'd all like to head back out there, but I think Seth's looking to tell stories in like different and new spots and sort of like where he wants to go and like newer places we haven't been before. So I think Area X, I wouldn't rule it out as a future possibility, but that's definitely, I mean, we just talked about the Discovery. That's nothing. So it's not going to be anything super soon.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that place is special to him. That's one of the places where he sort of kind of started believing that it exists.
Yeah, I would love to go out there sometime. So maybe if I ever had that opportunity, I would definitely head out there.
Sure.
I think anyone would.
Two Meals actually says I'm making a
Oh,
joke, but there should be one. Okay.
There should be.
Yeah.
We are in agreement.
I'm sure there will be one eventually.
Yeah.
All right. So Mike says, what cryptid would Andy like to look for? So
I'm trying to think. The melon heads are something that's like very local to us. I look for them quite frequently, so I don't know. Like, that's not really an answer to the question. A dream cryptid, something in like the Southwest. I feel like it would be fun just to head like that place. I'd like to go like Bigfoot in Bluff Creek. Would be fun because
so cool.
I realized, and this sounds, I don't know, maybe a little spoiled, but I realized that's one of the places I haven't been, and like that's one of like the iconic places I haven't been. Like I really want to head out there. That and like Dover Demon. I'd love to go over that way. I don't know what's with like large-headed cryptids. What's the theme with that? But I don't know. Yeah,
there you have
that
it.
and like Bigfoot, more Bigfoot, because I don't know. Bigfoot's the only cryptid I feel like, and this may not sound nice, but that's why I feel like I can personally most seriously like go out in the woods and look for. I mean, like you and Chasing Legends, I don't want to like slight anything with that because like that's great. I really enjoyed the last episode with like the Rougarou. That was really good.
Sure.
But like in my experience, that Bigfoot's sort of like the thing where it feels like something might happen, but that's also what I've spent most of my time in. So I'm biased when it comes to that. So
we'll see how you feel when we throw you in Lake Champlain.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'd love to go back to Lake Champlain anytime because I've been there once briefly. I'd love just to go there and claim that I was looking for Champ when I'd really just be enjoying the beautiful scenery and going to Ben and Jerry's.
No, I mean, you're right. Like some of the stuff we did on Chasing Legends and that, I've done in general, like even recently just on this channel, the Ultima Haha, just like water cryptids really fascinate me. But the Rougarou, I mean, and I talked about it too in the episodes, the Rougarou and the Pukwudgie. I don't know if I necessarily believe that there's like a physical being. I think maybe it's more paranormal or folkloric, whereas something like the Mogollon Monster, which is a Bigfoot-like creature, I totally could believe in because it's just sort of a regional variation of the Bigfoot. And as you said, even, going to a place like Bluff Creek, going to the Adirondacks, these are all environments where you feel like something like this could exist.
Yeah, I think to like sort of share my idea a little bit more, I have discovered that there's something really interesting that probably other people have sort of found, that is like when you go to a location that's like supposedly has like some urban legend or cryptid attached to it, there's this like weird place where, at least with me, like being like having grown up with this stuff and sort of being minor fear of it, like with the melon heads, there's stories, that they like run out and attack cars, where it's like that fear that's, even though it's irrational, like doing things like rolling down your windows and driving a little bit slower, sort of like trying to invite something to happen, mixed with like being a little like freaked out about it happening, like that little bit of like legend tripping is really fun. Like the same thing you can do it like in cemeteries at night. You drive through them slowly with like your windows down. And I mean, the scariest thought in my brain is that like I'll see a person, like an alive person, is sort of like the biggest thing. But like it's this really interesting thing that like I've discovered like with melon heads, because I've been driving down there, and that's, for those who don't know, it's like allegedly there was some kind of doctor who for some reason had like a group of orphans or his own children that had like large heads, whatever that the medical condition is called. And he has since passed away, but the children remain, and they haunt this road. Like, not haunt, they live by this road off in the woods, and they'll come out and attack cars. And so just driving down that, it's a fairly, I mean, there's houses along it, but it's fairly wooded and fairly rural road, driving down that at night. And with night coming and dark coming so early, with it still being winter, driving down that road, I haven't gotten that with Bigfoot, is sort of the interesting thing. You get that with like more the urban legend side of things.
Yeah.
Creepy side of things. But it's fun. It's a fun feeling to sort of thinking about and things like that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of these things that are more urban legend like that. I mean, one of these stories I used to hear that I was told by folks from New Jersey was that Jackson Whites which was this supposedly this. There's been like documentaries done on it where, and I had a friend, in college who told me like, oh yeah, they used to come through with Jeeps and they would chase people out with rifles, and it's like this isolated group of people that were like inbreds and all this stuff that lived not that far from New York City in the Ramapo Mountains of New Jersey, and they would like chase people out with guys in trucks with rifles, and they were described as looking. I think it's actually one of the stories that inspired that X-Files episode with the inbred family.
Yeah, that one's.
There was a show called Outsiders that ran for a few years that was kind of like based on that premise. Now, I guess the reality behind it is that it's actually like a Native American tribe that was multiracial. There were former German mercenaries from the Revolutionary War that ended up living in this area with Native Americans and escaped slaves. So there's like a bit of a weird kind of discriminatory thing there, which is too bad. But that like the urban legend persists. You have stories like the Melonheads. I mean, there's stories of Melonheads in Connecticut too. Even something like the Dover, not the Dover Demon, the Jersey Devil, I would argue is like you have that urban legend aspect of it with the birth of the child, and then combining. It's like a cryptid that bridges the urban legend, cryptid sort of motif. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really interesting.
Like I was saying earlier, way earlier in this episode, but like where I find my interest these days is where does cryptozoology and folklore like intersect, and what comes first, and what do we call cryptids now, and what was just a scary story 20 years ago, even that recently, like what comes first, and how do these stories come about? Because I think something that's really stimulating that thought is the fact that there's a crybaby bridge along the road that the Melonheads supposedly haunt. And the fact that there's allegedly a crybaby bridge in every county in Ohio, at least, sort of like you can't take it seriously as like everyone is haunted. Yeah. So like, and then it becomes like what came first. And when it comes to Melonheads, it seems to be purely urban legend. And the like little bit of research I've done, like purely word of mouth stories. But like then you start looking at things like cryptids and stories of cryptids and Bigfoot, and how they almost function as folkloric legends in like the sense that they're stories that are told about a place that are told as if they're true. But normally the weird thing with Bigfoot is normally with like urban legends and legends is they're told sort of like the storyteller, the person who tells you the story, is like a step removed from the urban legend or the story, like it's happened to a relative or someone in another place. But with Bigfoot and with cryptids, it's first person, it's firsthand. And that's what's really weird. But it follows, all the same motifs and like has similar patterns that, I mean, either suggest a real living creature or, I don't know, the same story repeated. 100%.
Yeah, I mean it's almost like a chicken and an egg situation where you have like, I mean, one that comes to mind is Loch Ness. You have this supposed story of Saint Columba in like the 12th century saving some guy from being eaten by this serpent-like creature in the River Ness, which connects to Loch Ness. And you wonder, was that like where the first mention of the Loch Ness monster was, or was there something going on that story became a part of, like the Jersey Devil thing? Was there something weird going on and that story was used to rationalize it? I mean, a lot of these wild man stories, I mean, are we just now looking at some of the wild man stories that have happened in the past, Grassman story, Skunk Ape, and kind of attributing it to the modern phenomena? I mean, it's something I think oftentimes end up pondering just when it comes to like how much of this stuff is actually folklore versus maybe describing a real creature.
Yeah, and it's really interesting with like Bigfoot specifically, at least to me, because it's the most widespread of this phenomenon.
Sure.
And there seems to be credible witnesses in the majority of those places, but also it follows these patterns, and like it at the same time is, I don't want to say like illogical, but is hard to wrap your mind around, because you look at a place like the Adirondacks where we were up on Whiteface Mountain and looked out and all you could see is trees and places for these things to hide, and you think to yourself, you know what, there could be something out there. But then you go to the fact that there's a sighting 15 minutes from my house where I'm at now, and I'm half an hour easy from Cleveland. It's like, that's where it gets bizarre, but it's still, very interesting stories. And I'm really not out here to like try to prove or disprove. I'm just here to sort of, hear stories and, maybe try to experience something, which then would rapidly change phenomenon.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's just one of those things that I think that STM just does is not, it's like, not going out there trying to prove this thing exists. It's just trying to cover those folkloric aspects. And it really kind of makes you wonder about a lot of that. I mean, the guy in the comments, Mr. Tumula, saying the rake is a good example of that, lesser extent Slender Man. Then you have this stuff like what he's talking about, almost like this internet created creepypasta stuff that then becomes associated with cryptids, even though, I mean, most would argue it's not really. But when it comes to Bigfoot, it's so widespread. I mean, the only thing that comes probably that it supersedes Bigfoot is UFOs, and that's not even cryptozoology. That's, I mean, some people would argue they're related, but that's like the only thing that's so culturally widespread across the world and all these different cultures. So it's one of those subjects that I think no matter where you go, for the most part, you can run into Bigfoot stories in your local areas. Whereas, something like Champ or Dover Demon, very specific. Like it's that body of water. It's this one incident that happened 50 years ago that's still talked about to this day.
Yeah, it's fascinating to like look at it from that perspective, and I think a lot of people are these days. And I'd really, encourage them to sort of take like a step further and like really look into folklore and like what folklore is, what like academic people have determined, legend and folktale and all that, to like really look into that, because it's really interesting. Because it is, if you want to know more about the story side of all this, then that's really something interesting to look into.
Definitely. I mean, you think about folklore around the world, people think of typically dragons and like maybe folkloric creatures throughout history. You've got commonly dragons, things like chimeras, a lot of these, from ancient mythology. While there were stories of Bigfoot-like creatures around the world in the Himalayas, and they play a part in Hinduism and other cultures, I mean, I would argue that Bigfoot is probably the most American, urban legend / folkloric thing there is. North American, let's say. We'll give the Canadians the Sasquatch. It's like, it's so Americana. Like people talk about Paul Bunyan and a lot of those logger stories from back in the day. Like that's American folklore, but I feel like there's nothing that's had as much longevity as something like Bigfoot.
Yeah, and these days it definitely is probably, at least towards the like legend side of things, the biggest part of American folklore today that's like talked about via word of mouth or the internet is Bigfoot. I completely agree that it's the most widespread, whether people realize it or not, part of American folklore today.
Totally. And I feel like it supersedes any cultural divides, because I mean, you have different parts of this country were settled by different people. I mean, you have all the tribes, first of all, they were there, but then you have people that were Germanic that settled the Midwest. You have people out west, Asians and all sorts of other cultures, and you still have Bigfoot stories all over the place. But you have something like the Rougarou, which is kind of a Cajun thing. Like that's a French Cajun thing. Bray Road, I would even argue, is almost like with those Germanic settlers there in Wisconsin, it's like pretty confined. So it's like culturally maybe not as present as Bigfoot is like everywhere. It doesn't really matter who you are. If you go to a patch of woods and you've done your research, you probably will be out there looking for Bigfoot. Like it's not as like the Rougarou is so specific to Cajun culture. And obviously STM is about to embark on a shoot for the Rougarou, I think in like this month. I think it's this month. Soon. I know I was talking to Seth about that. So it's very, very cool. But yeah, no, for the folklore, I think people oftentimes focus so much on the trying to prove the aspect of it's real, find evidence, but you have all this other stuff in the back that I think it's neglected. And I think that's where STM does a good job of picking it up.
Yeah, and to all those people who do spend their time out there in the woods researching, like I have such a respect for those people. Sure. Like I really do. Like I make jokes here and there, but like that's an amazing part of this field that like I don't think any other part of this crypto community has, is we do have all these researchers that are finding things that are like coming back with results. I mean, it may not be proof of Bigfoot's existence, but that go out in the woods and experience things. And that's extremely like interesting. Like that's so cool. And like I wish I had the time for that. I wish I could do that and not be exhausted the next day all the time. But like that's so much fun. And there is nothing like, you know, being out in the woods at night. That's an addictive feeling. Like that, like that something could happen at any moment. Like I think back being out on Buck Mountain with Steve Calls and his group, and it's like just feeling like at any moment something could happen.
Sure.
It's an addictive feeling for sure.
Oh, definitely. I mean, knowing that there's been activity in the area you're in, I mean, that's what motivates me to be going to this spot that I go to here in New Hampshire is like the stuff that I've had happen before. I mean, thinking what if something else could happen? I mean, trying to be as sober minded as possible and not tell, you know, not every little noise out there obviously is not Bigfoot, clearly. I mean, that's just wishful thinking. But yeah, like it's just going to be so interesting going, you know, a lot of researchers around, you know, around the country are, I mean, amateur, nothing wrong with that. Yeah. They're doing it, they're self-financed, they're doing it out of their budget. But it's going to be so interesting to see the Olympic project, which is like a very well-oiled machine. I mean, you've got a few groups like that that are really extremely well-oiled where their members bring specific professional capabilities to the table. Like they don't, you know, they have different people who have different roles. So it's going to be really interesting to see that in action, and just some of the other groups that, you know, we've interacted with as well. Like even Steve's group with Squatch Detective. I mean, they've got a lot of law enforcement guys, military stuff. So they're bringing all those skill sets to this search. But again, most of them are doing it on their own dime and kind of on their own will. So it's really interesting, that just the passion that drives people. So Carrick, he brought up a comment saying, I'm looking to head down to Dover sometime next year, Andy. Let me know if you want in. I got a few people like Eli joining. Yeah, Carrick and I have talked about that. I used to work 2 towns over from Dover, so I used to stomp around there. It's a really, I think a couple of the witnesses are still alive. And I've talked to Seth about doing like a possible documentary about that, while, you know, people like Lauren Coleman, who he was the one who coined Dover Demon. He's obviously in with STM as well. So it'd be very interesting to do that. Yeah, definitely.
That's an interesting offer. I'll have to consider that. Yeah, I've always wanted to go out there, and like you've said, like the connection to Lauren, you know, having met him and like having talked with him a few times, it'd be real interesting to head out there and see for ourselves.
And from what I know, like at some point, you know, you guys will be coming out here to do Bridgewater Triangle stuff. And I think that's obviously Lauren coined that name as well. Yeah. And the fact that the Dover Demon and the Bridgewater Triangle stories are really not that far from one another is really interesting. I think it's connected to the larger picture, even though people think of the Dover Demon as being this isolated incident. It's close enough where I think it maybe have had some effect there, but you know, that's a topic for another time. Yeah. So we get this question from Kevin, one of our Canadian listeners. He asks, Andy, do you feel like IMDb and other Hollywood sites discount your films because the subject matter is cryptid related? Do you find it difficult to promote things that aren't mainstream?
I don't think that they'd really discount us. I mean, we've had like press releases and like notable things. I know like Comic Book News just did something about The Journey, I believe. So I don't think they really discount us as much as they would any other independent production. I mean, if anything, we're out there more so than I think if people were just making, you know, independent documentaries about a non-crypto related subject, I don't think we're discounted. But I don't know. That's really not my department either. But I think I mean we do a fairly good job of getting out there what we got.
Yeah, I think more of the issue I mean, from what I've seen, there isn't really a restriction so much on the type of content. When it comes to cryptids, at least, I think it's more of an issue with independent filmmakers overall being targeted. Like there's been recent policies with Amazon where, I mean, they're looking to severely curtail the abilities for independent producers and filmmakers to get their product out there. I mean, Seth's talked about that and posted links about that on his social media. It's just, that's been like a constant uphill battle for years for independent creators. And as one, you know, I know that as well. It's unfortunate. But it's just, you know, you have to hopefully be able to have venues to get your stuff out there. And I think these stories are important because we're preserving stories that might not be around in 50 years. Like somebody might just forget about this one little cryptid incident in a little town in Louisiana, Missouri, you know, when all the people who originally were involved with the story have passed on or have moved away, you know, their kids have moved away from the area. That story might be lost, but then you can say, well, hey, there's that film about Momo, or there's, you know, Flatwoods Monster, or whatever the case may be, insert, you know, whatever cryptid. So it's just like, I think it's definitely a crucial part of that for sure.
Yeah.
Really interesting. But yeah, I mean, there's just so much. I do want to say, I keep forgetting to mention, folks, if you do want to support Small Town Monsters, the Kickstarter is still going on. There's about, I want to say 3 or 4 days left.
Yeah, I think it's 3 at this point. Yeah.
There's still, you know, blown out the goal that was set, but please go and support that. I didn't put a link in the description, but I will put one in as soon as this video is over. Go support that if you guys want to get in on some awesome rewards and just help out, you know, really great production. Obviously, Andy and I both are you know, working with STM on and off and doing some really awesome stuff. And everyone is just so talented that's involved with STM, especially when it comes to this stuff. And if you like this kind of stuff and you don't like the TV stuff, that's, you know, cheesy and you know, overly dramatic, go support STM, because STM is, you know, it's like we're actually people that are interested in this stuff. We're not just doing it for ratings.
Yeah, if you want to support if you want to support STM, if you like what we do and you want to support it, this is like the #1 way you can do so. And like you said, you can see like actually where we're coming from and what we'll make. Like there's no studio involvement. This is just us. If you like what we've done in the past, I mean, I'm not going to say it's going to be exactly like what's been there, because, you know, we're always sort of tinkering with everything, but it's the same people who made things before, and it'll be good. I know. Hey, if you just want to back because the journey, I can guarantee that one's pretty good.
Definitely, yeah, I can vouch for that one too, and obviously upcoming ones as well. So yeah, no, it's definitely, guys, if you want to get in on that, please support. And if like he said, the Kickstarter is the easiest way, but if not, just go watch some of the videos on Amazon, go buy a DVD, leave a review, go check out Monsteropolis. There's so much like involved with STM that you can help support and find out different ways to do it. So what are you waiting for, I guess?
Yeah. Come on, go on.
Absolutely. So I guess as we start wrapping up here, I wanted to ask you, you know, going forward with STM, and like kind of you've grown up with the subject, kind of circling back to that as we talked about growing up with the subject in the filmmaking. Where do you see, you know, in the next few years things heading? In that?
The subject? Where do I see the subject heading?
Well, yeah, I guess where do you see yourself within the whole? I mean, like let's say we do this 3 years from now. You have a bunch of new experiences under your belt. Yeah. What do you think? You know, going forward?
Well, I hope I stick with it, and I should stick with it. I don't know why I wouldn't, because like I've been in the subject so long, I genuinely love it. It's genuinely something that, you know, I love being a part of, and it's something that's captivated my interest completely. I hope I will have shot a few more movies for STM. That'll be fun. Maybe a thing or two of my own will be thrown in there.
Sure.
A few Andy Matzke cryptozoology movies. I think I just want to stick relatively close to where I am now. I don't know. I really like the format of the documentary, and I feel like it captures the subject really well. I hope that I will have some sort of experience sometime soon with something paranormal. I think that'd be interesting. But I don't know. I hope we're a little closer to the truth too. I think that'd be nice.
Oh, definitely. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting wondering, you know, going forward what's going to be happening. Definitely, because there's just so much going on, I think, and the interest is only rising in these subjects.
Yeah, I hope we can record as much of this history as we can. That's sort of like what I want to say about like the future, because like you're saying, if it's not recorded, it will be lost, and we are right on the cusp of that wave. I feel like with a lot of this classic Bigfoot stuff, we're on the cusp of losing, you know, witnesses and researchers.
Yeah.
So we need to really, you know, record as much as we can for future generations.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's just one of those things that, as these stories, especially from the 70s and the times of high strangeness, are getting older and older, that's, you got to wonder about the longevity of some of these stories in the long run. So Splash Boudreau asks, are you guys aware of the Florida expedition that Carrie from Bigfoot Odyssey is planning in March? And if they manage to capture anything interesting or any interesting footage, where do you think he should disclose? I don't know.
I don't. How is Florida for Bigfoot for you?
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, it was really cool. Like I've been to Florida a few times, but always, it's like the Disneyland kind of stuff. Yeah, the beach. And so I did a little bit of that, but we camped out in the Ocala National Forest for 2 nights. And like, wow, that place is squatchy. I mean, some really amazing terrain. We didn't have anything happen, unfortunately, but I would go back there in a heartbeat. And there's a lot of stories. There's so much research being done there. A lot of different people, obviously the skunk ape stories, but to answer Splash's question, I did hear about that. Carrie's a friend of the show. I've had him on, and Bigfoot Odyssey, they're an awesome program. They do a lot of this cool kind of stuff too. Where should they disclose something like that? I mean, he has a big platform, so I would say put it out like, on his platform, talk to the right people. He knows the right people. That's what I would do, is I would talk to folks that I trust, kind of behind the scenes, and ask them what's the best way to move forward, I guess. But then, kind of just be transparent. I mean, I think we've seen incidents even recently with the whole thylacine debacle. I don't know if you've been paying attention to that, but where it was just kind of handled poorly, I think, and it ended up a lot of people got angry, and it's a typical kind of cryptozoology drama kind of related thing. So I don't know, but definitely just find a venue, I suppose, that you trust, that you would release something like that. That's what I would do, at least. I can't speak for Carrie. Obviously, he's got his own way of doing things. But Brian and Chewy go hiking. I will be up in northern New Hampshire this weekend. Awesome, Brian. Yeah, Brian, I see you're hiking a lot out there. Awesome. I'm hoping to get out there. Again, I was out in northern New Hampshire, I think last week. Did a little hike through Crawford Notch, but very cool. But anyway, Andy, so going forward, you kind of talked a little bit about STM, but projects that you're working on kind of on your own, do you have any other things you're thinking about doing?
The podcast is sort of like my main focus right now. Like doing somewhere in Ohio, which really is just whatever I want it to be, but that's sort of like the trial run. If creative things I want to do, if I can like achieve them. Projects of my own, there's a few like cryptid stories that I'd like to talk about more. I mean, my first episode of Somewhere in Ohio is about the night siege stuff that happened like a county over from where I am now. That's just a weird story that like I wish I could like track down someone to talk to about. That would be fun to talk about because it's just so bizarre.
Right.
And also, I guess like future projects I'd like to work on. I really want to shoot a narrative. That's like something that's been on my mind. Watching what I shot for The Journey makes me want to see what trying my hand at that would be like, but what that would be exactly, I have no clue.
Just kind of trying it out. I mean, you're working with the right folks, and I think that's definitely an awesome thing to try out at some point. Like there's something different about, as we talked about even earlier, just narrative filmmaking compared to documentary filmmaking. It's just a different ball game. It really is.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting. But anything else, I don't know. We'll see if something comes up. We'll see. I don't know.
Awesome. And what's the best place for people to find you?
I'm on Instagram at I am Matzke. That's where I post the most. You can find the podcast at Somewhere in Ohio is also on Instagram at Somewhere in Ohio, I think. That I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. But if you want to like reach out to me, Instagram is definitely the place. That's it.
Awesome. Yeah, I posted a link to a couple of places to follow Andy on there. So thanks so much for coming on, man. It's been awesome.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope to have you on after we are done with the Discovery filming.
Yeah,
I'm hoping to have the whole crew on when we're back post B&W. So definitely that'll be fun. But yeah, thanks again for coming on. Thank you guys as always for all your questions and comments, and for bearing with the technical difficulties there at the beginning. Obviously, I don't know what happened there, but Andy kept you entertained as I could see from the comments. So very cool. As a reminder, guys, next week we'll be having on Edward Monge of the Bigfoot Quest. He's got a cool channel and he's a filmmaker as well. So we'll be back into talking about some cryptid filmmaking, which will be awesome. Check out the previous episodes. Chasing Legends link down in the comments as well. And Kickstarter. Oh, the Kickstarter for Small Town Monsters. I will put that as soon as I'm off of here. I will put that in the comments. Go support that if you want to support Small Town Monsters and support the awesome people that are involved in that. So thank you guys. Thanks, Guy15. Great show as always. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, we definitely got to talk, Brian. We'll have to go hiking at some point too. Raptor, great show. A lot of information. Thank you. And yeah, thank you again, everybody.
Good night. Thank you for having me.
All right. Of course, man. All right. Bye-bye. Everyone stay safe.